Is your portfolio lacking in geographical diversification? We have some ETFs that can take your investing geography to the next level. Hold on to your seatbelts, folks. This is going to be a good one. Most newer investors tend to stick with their own country when it comes to picking stocks. The TSX certainly has a lot of awesome Canadian stocks to choose from for sure. The largest economy in the world sits just south of us, and as a result, it becomes easy to find a little bit of U.S. diversification filtering into our portfolios, especially if you're an ETF investor. It goes without saying that a lot of Canadian ETFs look to the S&P 500 and other U.S. exchanges for some great growth and dividend potentials. I love our continent's markets, and most of my investments do fall within the greater North American markets, without a doubt. However, the world is a much bigger place than just North America, and there are a lot of investing opportunities out there in markets such as India, Japan, Europe, and of course Asia, just to name a few. There are international opportunities on the TSX to invest in ETFs that will make your investing money into, a larger world. Speaking of worlds, a sub to the channel would mean the world to me. For this list we are going to look at today, I wanted some international exposure without, having to leave the TSX. I will add that there are also some very, very good ETFs for international exposure in the U.S. markets. I did not include those today, but maybe in a future video we certainly will do that. Let me know in the comments if that is of interest to you. The only qualifier for today's list is that the ETFs we are looking at today offer exposure to one or many international countries. This list is sorted by year-to-date total returns. So without any further ado, let's do this. Kicking off this list, we have the iShares MSCI Europe IMI Index ETF with a ticker of XEH. This ETF invests in a diversified portfolio of European stocks across various sectors, focusing on companies located in the MSCI Europe IMI Index. Their price at the time of recording is coming in at $32.87. Their NAV, exact same thing, $32.87. Their assets under management come in at $142.98 million, and they've got a pretty stable beta of 0.85. That return on equity, that's coming in at 18.95%. The return on assets, 6.51%. Looking at their fees, their management fee comes in at a pretty low 0.25%. When we look at the management expense ratio, that's coming in at 0.28%. On the dividend front, they have a yield of 3%, and it is a semi-annual dividend of 69.4 cents per share. Let's look at those returns. On the 3-year, the return on investment comes in at 12.49%. Factor in the dividends, we get a total return of 21.91%. On the year-to-date, that return on investment, 8.16%. Total return, 11.41%. This is a great ETF for that European exposure. The 4 top countries in their basket include the UK, France, Switzerland, and, of course, Germany. Coming in at number 4, we have the iShares Core Equity ETF with a ticker of XEQT. They aim for long-term capital appreciation by investing primarily in index tracking iShares ETFs that provide broad-based exposure to global stocks. At the time of recording, their price was coming in at $30.60. Their NAV, exact same, $30.60. They have quite a bit of assets under management. That's coming in at $3.70 billion. Looking at their beta, it's coming in at 0.99, so they are pretty much as volatile as the market average, which would have a beta of 1. That return on equity, nice, 20.37%. Return on assets, 7.28%. Their management fee, nice and low, 0.18%. The management expense ratio, a little bit higher at 0.20%. On to the dividends, they have a yield of 1.975%. It's a quarterly dividend of 22.2 cents per share. Looking at their returns, on the 3-year return on investment, that comes in at 15.52%. Factor in the dividends, we get a total return of 21.66%. On their year-to-date, that return on investment comes in at 10.59%. Total return, 11.72%. This all-equity ETF does hold a lot of U.S. and Canadian equities, so it is a bit of a cheat for this list. However, 25% of their basket comes from international developed markets and an additional 5% from emerging markets. That's why we included them today. Taking our third spot, we have the iShares India Index ETF with a ticker of XID. This ETF looks to replicate the performance of the Nifty 50 index, which provides exposure to the top 50 of the largest and most liquid Indian stocks. At the time of recording, their price was coming in at $55.50. They have an NAV of $55.21. Assets under management, 115.37 million. And wow, they don't have a lot of volatility with a beta of 0.44. This is the only one we do not have a return on equity or a return on assets for. So let's move to those fees. The management fee on this one, 0.98%. So it's definitely one of the higher ones on the list today. And that management expense ratio comes up at 1.03%. On the dividend front, they have a yield of 0.345%. It's a semi-annual dividend of 2.7 cents per share. Looking at their returns on the 3-year return on investment, that comes out at 25.08%. Total return after we factor in the dividends of 36.03%. On the year to date, that return on investment comes in at 11.90%. Add in the dividends, we get a total return of 12.28%. The Indian market is the fastest growing market in the world, and that means there is a lot of opportunity for growth, and this ETF is poised to return a good part of that growth to your portfolio. In our almost top spot at number 2, we have the Vanguard FTSE Emerging Markets All Cap Index ETF with a ticker of VEE. They invest in a broader range of large, mid, and small cap stocks from emerging markets with some significant exposure to China, Taiwan, India, and Brazil. At the time of recording, their price comes in at $35.95. Their NAV, exact same, $35.95. Assets under management, another big one, $1.86 billion. Their beta comes in at 0.96, so their volatility is pretty close to the market average. That return on equity, 17.59%. Their return on assets, 7.79%. Switching over to fees, their management fee comes in at 0.23%. Management expense ratio, 0.25%. Looking at their dividends, they do have a yield of 2.468%. It's paid out quarterly in the amount of 10 cents per share. Looking at their 3-year return on investment, it is in the negatives at negative 9.40%. Factor in the dividends, we're still in the negatives, negative 2.54%. This ETF definitely was impacted by the bear market, but things have improved, hence they're on this list. Looking at that year to date, we have a return on investment of 10.28%. Factor in the dividends, total return 12.34%. This is a good ETF to gain exposure to the emerging markets. Geographically, their top 4 countries are China, India, Taiwan, and Brazil. In our top spot at number 1, we have the CI Japan Equity Index with a ticker of JAPN. This ETF looks to replicate the performance of the Solactive GBS Japan Large and Mid Cap Canadian Hedged Index. It is designed to provide exposure to large and mid-cap securities in Japan, while the hedging part hedges the risk between the Japanese yen and the Canadian dollar. At the time of recording, their price was coming in at $49.72. Their NAV coming in at $49.81. Assets under management, not bad, 1.05 billion. Their beta 0.55 means they're almost half as volatile as the market average. Their return on equity coming in at 14.14%. Return on assets, 7.32%. Looking at the fees, that management fee coming in at 0.23%. Their management expense ratio a wee bit higher at 0.24%. Switching to those dividends, they do have a yield of 2.90%. It's a quarterly dividend of 36 cents per share. Let's take a look at those returns. On the 3-year return on investment, that comes in at 85.80%. Factor in the dividends, we get a total return of 96.42%. That's not too shabby. Looking at their year to date, that return on investment coming in at 26.32%. Total return after we add in the dividends, 27.97%. Holy banana bread. That's pretty good for an international ETF. This is a great ETF to gain exposure to another of the world's strongest economies. I really do have high expectations for this one for sure. These are some pretty good ETFs for your first steps into international investing. We will definitely look at what is available in other markets in a future video, starting with some of the great international ETFs available on the US market, like a few of those ETFs I saw for the UK. Maybe, if we get adventurous, we can even look at stocks on other markets outside of our North American bubble. If you are interested in any of these ETFs we looked at today, don't forget to put in a whole heaping helping of due diligence before you place any of your hard-earned money on the table. Let's continue that learning journey. Check out this video on XEQT. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.